we had a campus at the Brantford General campus, on Brantford General site. So those of you who have been there, you'll notice that the hospital seems very divided. This is an old section, new section, old section. But where the psych wing is, that was the old nurses' residence. And so Mohawk College had that, as well as when you're going across by the Tim Hortons, that was actually a bridge. And so we had our Learning Resource Center down below by the auditorium, library, everything was there. So we did have many students that came from the Six Nations Reserve because they knew Brantford, they felt comfortable in Brantford, and it was an easy place to get to. Once that program closed, and then it moved to Shadok first, and then it moved down the mountain to the IHS where it currently is, there was a real disconnect. So there was a disconnect in that on the reserve then, they had more people who were not First Nations working as healthcare providers there. So they started to negotiate with Mohawk College to have a program, and it would be practical nursing, because that was right at the cusp where we knew that diploma nursing would be going to the university. That was already written. So hence came the name practical nursing with Aboriginal communities, not in. And that was done on purpose because when you think about it, does every town and city not have Aboriginal people and Indigenous people? So that's why it is what was with, not in. But the hope was that with Vision 2020, and that was sort of universal health for all, are we there yet? No, and that was 20 odd years ago. So they really wanted to have 100 Indigenous nurses that graduated from the PNAD program. And we have met that and exceeded that at this point in time. And I'm also happy to say that there are a number of our past graduates that are working on the Six Nations Reserve and on other reserves. So, and that was always the fear, is that people would not return to their home when we really needed them to be in their home, taking care of the people in their community. And that has happened here. So that is a very good, pardon me. The other part is that they recognized that there were barriers. Some of the barriers to admission were transportation. That it was very hard for people to get to Brantford reliably and get then to Shadok on the mountain and then off the mountain. The other barriers were that people didn't feel comfortable going into a large campus with a whole bunch of people. The Brantford campus was also a smaller campus. It was around 80 with faculty that, I mean, we knew all of our students, you know, we got to know them throughout the years. And parking was cheap, which parking isn't cheap at the IHS, like 20 bucks a day. And then the other barrier was that we really wanted to have what they have called a facilitated admission. And that still continues to this day, meaning that it will be First Nations people commuting that are really scored against other First Nations people. You get the first spots. And then after that, are there any other people who would like to come to an Indigenous program? Now, we say Indigenous program, meaning that you're not learning, because so many of you are Indigenous people. I have nothing to teach you about your culture. But what I have to teach you about is looking at how, as healthcare providers, that we are interacting with Indigenous people. Also, the Six Nations Polytech, where its location, but a very different flavor. It's not that this is not a wonderful institution, but out there, the minute I walked into that building, I had a sense of peace and calm. It was just instantaneous. And something in that building and the way that the people in that building treated each other brought that sense of calm to that environment. It's not that it's not here, but it's not the same.
It's different.
Mhm.
It's just different. I can't describe it. Janice and I have talked about it. So when you look at that, your program is identical to the one that's at the IHS. But you have it in a much calmer environment, a much more peaceful environment. Isn't it more peaceful here
Mhm.
when you go to the IHS?
Yeah.
No? Oh, okay.
Why is that? What do you see here that, so what's making that difference?
What's not peaceful? So what do you find not peaceful here, or do, I guess it's the atmosphere that was created?
I find this a very peaceful atmosphere.
Mhm.
Like, this atmosphere is far more peaceful than it is at the IHS. Six Nations Polytech was even more peaceful. Half of that has to do, it's out in the country.
Mhm.
You know, and I mean, a lot of that, when you're looking at that and you're looking at the scenery, you know, it's very different when you're in a city environment as opposed to a very country.
Well, for
or rural
instance, when
environment.
we would walk into the building, anybody, you walk, if you've been through those hallways, you know what I mean. Some of you have, some of you haven't. There, you walk in, there's, one of the first things is the turtle on the floor, right?
Mhm.
So there's a message there that tells the story there, and that gets you kind of grounded in where you're at and where you can go, you know, where you're gonna go that day. As we would walk into the classrooms, right, the classrooms are all named, some of them are named here, I notice as I
Mhm.
walk around the building, but not so much up this end where we are. But the classrooms were all named, like, according to the Six Nations, right?
Yeah.
Or some of the, words of the culture
Yeah,
that
words of the culture.
they use in naming the rooms, right? The whole history, much of the history is there on the walls. So if you knew nothing, I am First Nations myself, but I don't know the Haudenosaunee culture. I'm Cree background, and I don't know that culture very well, just as they would know my culture very well, right? So, but I can look at some of those things and get reminders and gain knowledge and understanding just from being in that room, in that building, right? And they did have an office off to the side, or a section where they worked, I don't remember the name of it, where, Rick Hill.
Oh, yes, his,
Yeah, where they all
Indigenous Knowledge Center.
Knowledge Center was in that building as well. As well, some of the building where the, part of the building was for, where the students got their, funding
Yes.
sorted out. So it was some of the, funding for the Indigenous students, and that it was all in the same building. The people in the front office were all usually pretty much from Haudenosaunee culture, they knew. So everything in there, we smudged every day in our program.
Every class.
Every class, at the beginning of the class. And if something happened, that there was an upset in what was going on, Andrea or I, or sometimes one of the other workers would take that person out. It might be a separate time to smudge the talk. We might have an elder there. Quite often we had an elder on site who could help us with getting that situation under control again and talking it down a bit. There was things like that, and as well, we had people, some of the cooks from there. I remember at one time they would come in and they did breakfast for us, like all the time, every week when we were there, right? Or lunch, breakfast or lunch, you would kind of alternate. There was many things, plus we had in that building, we're not there, so we get, it's not to, but it was a great big room, it's called the Grand River Room, right? And it's totally conducive to, we have many of our things in that room, right? So it was all there, it helped to create the feeling that we had, right? Which helped us to promote those teachings in what we were doing. And it isn't that we sat down and said, this class is completely about Indigenous culture, and we're going to teach that today, and that's the lesson you're getting. It was woven into what we were doing, woven right in. And I don't know if, like, even for the way I teach, you all know my style, you know the way I work, the way, that in itself, I'm not sure if you realize it, but that in itself is part of being Indigenous. The way I handle things, the way I talk, the way I present information, the way so it may not be up there in, big bold letters, but it's part of who I am. It's the way I learn to do things within my culture, right? So that part we carry with us all the time. And as well, Andrea would often remind me. She would sometimes take her cues and say, okay, I need you to do such and such, right?
So, there are things that are different from when the program started to what it is now. It doesn't mean that it is any better or worse, it is just different. Do we need our own PNAP curriculum? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody has a spare $150,000 that they'd like to donate, then Janice can be working on that before she retires.
$7.5 billion allocated for Indigenous education.
I know, and can we have some of that for curriculum?
That's what they need to get some of it to curriculum
Yeah,
development.
absolutely.
Time to work on those things. We can see 1,000 places at least where we could infuse some of the, some of that. But you have to have time to develop it.
And keep it up.
Mine here, I have to teach you, my contract, my obligation is to teach you the content of the nursing program, right? If I'm lucky and I do try to infuse some of that, and all of the teachers are trying to do that.
They have to
but
put Indigenous people in decision-making situations.
That's right.
Because non-Indigenous people can't decide what needs to be taught in terms of cultural sensitivity and in terms of systemic racism, and it just can't, to just be the prof to teach it, but the people behind you telling you what to teach don't know what they're telling you to teach, so.
Or how to make the connections.
How to make the connection, and you really have to have people who are already experienced nurses as well. So, because we are also, we have two bosses, we have Mohawk College, but we also have the College of Nurses of Ontario. So we have to have a curriculum that is set according to their standards. And we can put other things into it and have much more of an Indigenous worldview, which is not there. And that definitely can happen. But I think it's just, and we have some of our past graduates from this program have gone on and they do have their masters and they are interested. The interest is there. And the powers that be at Mohawk know their names because they are very interested in doing
And
it.
every time they ask us, there must be somebody from the programs you graduated, and we'll give them names. And some of those names they've worked into jobs
Yeah.
for these people, right?
But you are correct, is that is something that we're working on, but we don't want the PNAC program as it is to not go forward because we don't have that curriculum, because we are educating Indigenous people. Now, what about the people in this room that are not Indigenous? Why is it important to have really, and Rebecca Jameson, the CEO of Six Nations Polytech, was very firm that we didn't have 100% Indigenous students. If we had 100%, that was fine, but then we had to go over. Because how many nurses that you meet in all of the surrounding community and hospitals are not Indigenous? And they have no interest in Indigenous culture. They have no knowledge of Indigenous history. So that was also the point of this program, is to raise awareness of what are some of the issues currently. Like, how many people here did not know that there was such a thing as residential schools? Be honest. Yeah.
And we work with faculty members.
Faculty you don't.
Who did not know, as of this year, did not know,
Yeah.
So, sorry, I guess my question is if it's the exact same program as AI, why is it called Working with Aboriginal Communities? Because I'm not Indigenous. I've learned about the residential schools, I appreciate the culture in the classroom, but other than that, I haven't learned really how to be culturally sensitive, how to work
Yeah,
with
that's
Indigenous
the
people in the
piece that's
healthcare
still
field.
missing.
So I selected this program for that information, and I genuinely don't feel any more equipped with that. So that's where my question comes in, why is it all working with Aboriginal communities
Yeah.
when it's the exact same as?
Now, did you take the Spirit of the 2 Oakham?
I couldn't, that was the only class that had any indigenous like background to it.
But even still, the spirit of the two-row only taught you our traditional ways, which he doesn't need to know. It serves him no purpose. What's he gonna do, smudge at home? No. He needed to learn cultural sensitivity, and that wasn't, not to take away from two-row, it was
No, no.
great for the
Yeah.
indigenous students, but for non-indigenous students, what purpose did it serve?
Well, to teach them what are some of the indigenous rituals.
What purpose does that serve in the nursing career?
So that when people need to, and you do have people, that it's a fairly common thing now for indigenous people to ask to have some of their cultural practices allowed in the hospital
And they
setting.
don't
She didn't teach about that though, she taught historical, traditional teaching.
Yeah,
She
I
taught
know
about
what she
symbols,
taught.
she taught about,
Like self-help mostly.
yeah,
Okay.
self-care, she taught
Yeah.
about the two-row and what it represents in the treaty that it stands for, that doesn't serve them any purpose. Like, without cultural sensitivity, what was the point for them? Like, great for the ones who took it, I'm glad you were super interested, but it's
Yeah.
not, one, it's not what they were looking for or asked for, and two, it doesn't really do anything for them.
Okay, so that was a very different course than the one that Rick held taught.
Yeah.
Because Rick had,
Yeah.
how when people come into the healthcare system.
My problem is how is it a course, this practical nursing with Aboriginal people or communities, and they don't leave, they don't even know what Jordan's principle is.
Yeah.
How are you not teaching that? They don't know what Shannon's dream is. They don't understand about funding and how you can live on the reserve and you'll get your services like that, but Janice won't and can wait and wait and wait. Like, those things, because they're gonna be in a position to advocate later.
Right.
So it doesn't make any sense. That's what I'm saying. And I know everybody wants to do their posters and
Okay.
but I'm just
Okay,
getting
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
really, I don't know where that's conversation.
Well, why don't you try and answer those questions, there was a couple of questions that weren't answered,
And I think this even now, when we're talking about like what it was, and when we talk about, facilitated admissions, and we're talking about Indigenous education funding, you're talking to a bunch of non-Indigenous people who don't know why. And so now it just furthers that stereotype that we're getting all this special treatment, when all of these people don't understand why we have funding. They probably, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them probably heard from their families and their social, taxpayers' dollars, and
No, they're not-
so when you
they're
stand
not
here and you say
taxpayers'
this, but
dollars.
they
No.
don't have any historical context, it furthers
Yeah.
the stereotypes.
And I think one of the other things that Andrea and I were trying to do when we were teaching this in the earlier years, right, was we always infused that kind of information into, because it's not being addressed, you're absolutely right, in the bigger picture, right? But we would talk about that, we would let the students know, and we would, as the questions came, we couldn't make a course out of it because that just wasn't in the cards at the time. But we did try to infuse some of that information as we were going along. Some of it works, some of it didn't.
Well, and facilitated admission, the purpose of it is to take down barriers. And it's not something that then you're looking at this as a lesser program. Our graduates are some of the top graduates of the RPM program. Like, that is absolutely not true. So when you look at that, it's just to make sure that we're not creating barriers for Indigenous people, and that was a barrier. Transportation was a barrier. Having education not in your own community, that was a barrier. And so that's why the program was started and continued. And because there still is an interest, and believe me, like, it will continue to grow. Do we need our own curriculum? Yes, we do, absolutely, 100%.
So we better end it because.
Yes, because everybody's getting really agitated. I could